Commanders! Okay. Last week, I made a video about nerfing Rogers. And in that video, I think it was a fireside chat, I talked about trying to get to the bottom of the issue in our game. And I wasn't quite sure what the issue was. I'm a big picture guy. I need to have everything in front of me. I need to look at everything, touch everything, quantify everything, figure out the whole objective of what everything's doing, and then I start breaking down each element. So in about a week's time, I've finally figured out where I wanted to take the issue with our game. And when I say the issue with our game, what this video is going to be about is balancing the game the way it was meant to be played. So if you've been following the channel, especially for the last week, Rogers and Rangers I've been talking about, terror space damage I've been talking about, the late game, super late, tier 12 meta, even though I'm not a tier 12 player, even though you're probably not a tier 12 player, where most of us are in guilds with players that are tier 12, and they define the super late game that this game is about. And even though we don't have those troops, we are vested into those players and their troops and their armies because they're going to decide how far we get in the Galactic Battle playoffs. And it's no secret that if your two main ships are a tier 12 infantry and a tier 12 walker, you're not going to get past the airship commanders because airship meta is broken. So after much deliberation between the subreddit and Station 22 and people in the line community, I have finally narrowed down and kind of focused in on what the real issue in our game is. And I want to knock off a few things first so you don't think I'm forgetting them. Like, it's obviously an issue that we still have level 15 tiles and not level 18 tiles. It's obviously an issue that Guild Fort level 2 is the max you can take it to until it becomes a PvP issue. Okay, these aren't our problems. Yes, tier 1 not being worth 0 points is a problem, but it is not defining the end game and deciding how the late game spenders are going to play, which commanders to use. Those things are just minor issues we need to change. Vega being a B commander when he should be an A commander. Let me just address that. Listen, guys, I understand you don't want your new sweet Vega commander to be replaced and nerfed right away, but we're not talking a big nerf. We just want to make sure that main commanders, Rogers, Reinhardt, Stella, Elf, Galileo, anyone that's a super late game commander that should be an S-class or A-class, costs the right amount to awaken. Otherwise, Vega is a legit late game commander. He has replaced Golem, where he used to be an evolution into Golem. Now you can keep Vega permanently awakened, and he's a super late game main commander. It needs a micro nerf. I understand your frustration. And I agree that that should not happen until the elephant in the room is addressed. The elephant in the room is Rogers. If you've been following this channel for a year, I used to rationalize Rogers. I used to say things like, well, yes, Rogers is incredibly overpowered and good, but he defines the meta. Everyone knows what they're up against with Rogers. You know that he's an airship commander. You know he's going to go immune in the first round. You know that you have to one-slot bust him or break through right away, and you cannot go toe-to-toe with him, with anyone, unless you have strength and weaken. But even then, it's sketchy, because all he needs is one piece of resistance weaken gear. Okay. I'm tired of rationalizing Rogers. Rogers was a stupid money grab by the developers. They launched him after Golem was so powerful in Season 2, Season 3, and they were like, let's make a commander so good that every spender has to buy him. And he was a Release 10 event commander, and he came out, and his skill basically read every 1%, or every level 1, he'd get a 0.5% damage reduction per level. So at level 60 defensive stack, and I'll go to this screen here. At level 60 defensive stack, he had a 30% chance to reduce damage. So an 80% chance to trigger. So by the third slot, he had an 80% chance each time. He'd be at 90% damage reduction. On the fourth trigger, he'd be 120% damage reduction. And he still has slots 5 and 6 to trigger it. So more often than not, 9 out of 10 times, Rogers is going to be immune as you're fighting him, and he's just hammering away at you. So all you do with Rogers is build him like a tank, and he would just take the first damage or dodge the first damage, then he'd go immune, and then use Tyrant Cometh, because it's a guaranteed hit skill, to do a ton of damage later on. You put Libra and Gemini on him, and he's an incredibly powerful commander. Okay, I rationalized it for too long because it made sense. Everyone knew that Rogers was the commander to beat, and there were options even back then. Golem 1-slot bust, Stellum 1-slot bust, Chief Moonshadow 1-slot bust were working against Rogers. But then tier 11 came around, and it was like, oh, Rogers is really good, and walkers became useless. And the reason walkers became useless is because they had no answer to Rogers. And that's what the problem with Rogers became, is that everything in this game comes down to Rogers. How do you deal with Rogers? I mean, that's how you rank every S-Class commander. I can tell you right in front of me, look, Rogers, best commander in the game. Golem Vega, second best commander in the game, definitely airships-wise. Reinhardt's on the list because he counters Rogers, and that's it. Reinhardt shouldn't even be on that list, but he is because of how good Rogers is. And then Stella, because she can one-slot bust Rogers. And then Elf, because she beats everyone else that isn't Rogers. Notice how there's no Walker commanders in there except for Elf, and she doesn't address the Rogers issue. I mean, don't get me wrong. I understand that Chief and Galileo and Pictor are all great commanders in their own right, but they do nothing to Rogers, and they're not in the meta, and you don't see main players using them. There's one guy from CAD that has an Elf that we saw last season, which was awesome, but no one else uses Walkers. Well, we know how to fix the issue. It's Rogers. You've got to get rid of Rogers. Imagine a world without Rogers. Let me say that again. Imagine a game without Rogers. I understand that you can't just delete Rogers from the game. Players would be pissed. But there is a way to balance Rogers so that he's still incredibly good, but not totally invulnerable, and that Walkers can finally come back on the scene. So let's just play a game with me. Just play a little game with me. Imagine if Rogers wasn't in the game. Who's the next big commander, big army to worry about? Well, Tier 12 is single type. So airships get airships, infantry get infantry, and walkers get walkers. That means, unlike Tier 10, Tier 11, you don't have to worry about using different troops or different commanders. That means, who's the best airship commander if Rogers is not? Well, let's talk about that. I mean, Reinhardt's really good. He's good toe-to-toe. He's going to be good against Elf, and he should be. Elf's a walker commander. But he kind of lacks the guaranteed hit skill. The Thorns kind of help make up for it. And the tear space damage really helps, but he still has to land those hits. So he's going to need Gemini, Libra. So Reinhardt's good. Maybe not the best choice, but Reinhardt's up there. What about Vega? Well, Vega or Golem? Well, yeah, I mean, if everyone's not using Rogers and people are using more balanced gear, not pure defense gear like Rogers uses, Vega's not as powerful as Golem in every matchup. I would probably prefer Golem against infantry and walkers. And it may vary by gear, right? If they're using a ton of defense gems, then you're going to get more value out of Vega. But Golem becomes a player again. I don't think there's a lot of room for other airship commanders except Rogers' replacement. Who's going to be the de facto defense commander if Rogers disappears? Well, we said Reinhardt. Reinhardt's not a terrible choice, but he does require a lot of damage absorbing to do damage. So I'm not thrilled about the Reinhardt choice, but you know who is really good? Takeda. Takeda was the original dodge boss guaranteed hit commander that they're like, hey, this Takeda guy's working out. Why don't we make a Rogers who's kind of similar but goes immune? Remember, Takeda's 20% skill is a guaranteed hit and ignores defense, like Vega. But he doesn't ignore defense total. He ignores defense boost. I think it's slightly different. Still good. And then he has Will of Steel. This increases your defense and dodge rate. So he's a tanky, offensive, kind of balanced commander who would be a good de facto kind of in the middle offensive defense commander without being totally polarized to pure defense. So that's my solution for airships. You'd have Vega Golem, Takeda Reinhardt. 4 legitimately good choices for airship. All 4 of them. But in order to get those choices to be viable, you got to get rid of Rogers. Now, with Rogers gone, think of this. Who are the infantry? Let's go walkers first. Who are the walker commanders? Well, I keep talking about Elf because she's amazing. But who else would be good? Well, without having to worry about Rogers, who would be good as a walker commander against a dodge commander, defensive commander like Takeda? Well, King wouldn't be terrible because if Takeda starts dodging him, King is going to start doing super damage. Now, I know you typically don't want to go walkers versus airships, but you could. And if the damage is, it's not like in a Rogers fight, it's like 1,000 to 1. For every 1 troop you kill a Rogers, you'd kill 1,000 of yours. In a walker versus airship commander, if it was Takeda versus King, it'd be more like maybe 3 to 1 or 5 to 1. Much more manageable. You'd still you'd still lose, but it wouldn't be so devastating because it's more of a balanced prop rock, paper, scissors game. But with Mind's Eye, if Takeda does start dodging, he's going to start doing bonus damage. Oh, also, I didn't even mention, Lady and Beast would be a viable choice for airships again. How fun would that be? And then what else we have in Walker? We have Pictor, who's the best offensive balance commander in my opinion. He's got a 20% guaranteed hit skill. Increases crit chance, not so big there. But it's 20% guaranteed hit skill. And he has sticky bombs at a 60% chance. Now, this is the same as Hoodoo's sticky bombs, but instead of being 40%, it's 60, and the damage, instead of being 1.75 per level, it's 1.5 per level. So he hits twice as often and twice as hard, which means this skill is 4 times better than Hoodoo's skill. And what does Hoodoo have instead? Hoodoo has that Death Rattle, which is amazing. Hits 50% harder and twice as often, so 3 times better, something like that. He has Death Rattle. Now, Death Rattle's amazing if you kill the entire slot, but in a toe-to-toe fight, you're usually not one-shotting slots, especially with Tier 12. It does happen, don't get me wrong. Hoodoo's not a terrible commander, but in a toe-to-toe fight, Pictor versus Hoodoo, I'm probably taking Pictor. But that also opens up the options for Moonshadow, or my favorite type of commander in the game, Galileo. Airship commanders, I didn't even mention Blader. Blader would be amazing too, but imagine Galileo with his heal and his ramp accuracy and attack, right? Think of that. Increases attack and accuracy on his instinct, 60% chance, and then 40% chance he gains HP based off the damage he does. Imagine that with Tier 12. That could do really well. I don't know if it'd work with Tear Space, but it'd still be really good. But you get what I'm saying? For airships, you have Reinhardt, Blader, Golem, Vega, Takeda, Lady and Beast. 6 legitimately good airship options, probably more, right? And then for walkers, you get King, Hoodoo, Pictor, Elf. Who am I forgetting? I'm forgetting someone. Galileo. I wouldn't say Medusa. Dodging isn't that big of a deal. I don't know. Those 4 or 5. And then let's talk about infantry. Now remember, this is all hinging on the fact that Rogers is gone. Once Rogers is gone, all these options open up. And I know you can't just delete Rogers, but you can lower his defensive stack to make him only go 90% damage reduction. He'd still be really good, but not totally invulnerable, not meta-defining good. Then it opens the game up to this normal way the game is meant to be played. It didn't used to be this lopsided. Rogers broke everything, and I'm tired of defending him. Let's go to infantry. We'll finish this video off with my final claim. Because I said the whole point of this search, this idea, was that we were going to get to the heart of the issue, the elephant in the room. And we've talked about all these other things, and I briefly talked about it at the beginning of this video. But I've decided it's Rogers. Rogers needs to be nerfed. Has to be. Otherwise, this stuff won't come true. So let's say Rogers gets nerfed. That means infantry should have an advantage on airships. Who's going to be the main airship? Probably Golem, Vega. Probably. I mean, there's still room for Blader. There's still room for Reinhardt and Takeda. I think the low-risk commanders like Golem and Vega are always going to be preferred. But Reinhardt versus Golem or Reinhardt versus Vega in a toe-to-toe? Ooh, that'd be a good matchup. I don't know. I'd have to see. Probably the offensive commanders. But that opens up the discussion for infantry. Infantry should beat all those airship commanders the way it was meant to be played. Stella's always going to be the number one choice there, right? Not the X. The X is just the pre-evolution of Stella. But who else is an option? Well, I will admit that the infantry class does kind of suck right now. Yeah, they buffed Lilith a little bit. 60% chance to make your opponent skip their turn. That's actually pretty awesome. With Tear Space, and if you put a couple damage gems on her, Scorpio, you could probably really eke out a living with her with that Tear Space bonus. But because guaranteed hit commanders are all part of the meta now, dodging is just not a great way to avoid damage. I do like Lilith. I'd like to see more Lilith. I'd also like to see more Robin. Robin's amazing. Did I eat my Robin? Yeah, he's there. Very similar idea. Doesn't let commanders use their attack jewels. Gemini, I'm sorry. What's her name? Gilly is a great counter to Stella. But she kind of depends on making commanders lose their guaranteed hit gems. And all the big airships and walkers are going to have guaranteed hits without gems. Elf, Pictor, Golem, Vega, Reinhardt. Those are all no one's relying on gems. Really, it's the infantry commanders that are relying on gem hits like Stella. So I'm not a big fan of Gilly if Rogers deletes or gets nerfed. But what else? You know, I think there's a lot of room for Nekajiro. I know he's a D-class commander, but his sniper ability reads like Vega's ability, and it does not work like Vega's ability. At this point, I just realized my camera is on me and not the game. Oh, boy. How long has that been going on? Okay. Well, I've been clicking on the commanders in the background, so... you know, here's Lilith, 60%. Here's Nekajiro, 40%, but he could be played like Vega if they just buff his second skill. Now, I get it. He's a D commander. He probably shouldn't be that powerful. But then also, Thunder Ray has a chance to be the next commander buffed. So it should be Blader, Galileo, Thunder Ray has all the ramp commanders. The thing is Blader and Galileo have 60% skills. Thunder Ray has a 40% skill, which really hurts. Is it Call of the Hunt 60%? I think so. It should be 60. I might be wrong. Anyway, that would fix it, though. That's what I'm saying. Do you see all the options start to open up? You really start to realize, yeah, Stella's still going to dominate the meta. But there is an argument for Robin. There is an argument for Thunder Ray. Elixir needs a buff. She's basically Stella. But you can start opening up these new ideas. If someone's really maining, you know, Reinhardt, who's the best counter to Reinhardt? I don't know. Is it Stella? Is it Robin? Is Stella just always a better choice because of the versatility? We've always based this game around how to beat Rogers. And I'm so done defending Rogers. If this game wants to change, it needs to dump Rogers. It does. Rogers has got to go. They've been trying to get the game slowed down. They want to add more defensive gear. They want to add higher tier with bigger defense that lasts longer and longer rounds, and that just favors more and more Rogers. And everything is literally circulating around trying to solve the Rogers problem, which was fine. It was fine for the last year, for the first five seasons of Galactic Battle. But I tell you this, the only counter to Rogers is Reinhardt. It's not a good counter. It's basically a fair trade. You're better off using Rogers against Rogers if you just want to clear him. We can't have 5 more seasons of Rogers. We can't. What's the game going to be? 5 more seasons of Rogers. Terror space damage can be adjusted. They can fix it and go to primary stat. That's one of the ideas. But until the Rogers issue is fixed, our game is going to be fundamentally flawed because it is not a rock, paper, scissors trade-off game. Guilds that invest heavily into walkers and infantry will never be as good as a guild that just goes airships. I mean, your 2 best players, tier 12 airships, Vega Rogers will always beat infantry walker setups. It's bullshit. It's not the way the game was meant to be played. Honestly, the game's doomed if they don't do something about Rogers. They don't need to delete him. They need to lower him down to 90%. Could they adjust it to not 90, but like if they, instead of triggering 4 times to get a 120% reduction, maybe he can trigger 5 times to get a 100% reduction? I really don't like the idea of a commander going totally immune. I really think it's stupid, especially when you invest so much into this tear space ability that tier 12 can use, and then it does 0 damage to Rogers. I don't know. Just doesn't seem smart. I don't know why they kept it in. I don't know why they haven't nerfed him sooner, but that's the solution. I think that's the solution. Do you agree? Am I wrong here? I mean, it seems pretty obvious to me now after looking at everything, and I can address everything. I've got, I don't know, 7 or 8 or 10 ideas from all these people that have been pitching in ideas about little things about the game they'd like to see change. Little things to them that seem important, but in the grand scheme of things don't really matter compared to these major issues. Nerfing Vega, that's a minor issue. And it's not a major change. Vega's still going to be the same. You just don't get to keep rolling that Awaken. But if they don't do something about Rogers, this game's going nowhere. So, I don't know. Is it a good idea? Tell me in the comments below. You know I love comments, especially on ideas that change the meta, because these videos, these ideas roll into new ideas, they roll into new content, they roll into suggestions. These are things we talk to the devs about because it's us, right? We are the voice of our game, right? We are the mid spenders. We are the players that are funneling all of our resources to the big players to keep them going. If we stop, if we quit and we're not farming and we're not funneling and we're not encouraging our big players to spend and win, then the game falls apart. And they need good ideas. They want the game to keep going. They want the game to be fun for us. Obviously, they don't want to stop making money. They don't want to lose money. They don't want ideas that break the game. So is this a good idea? Is it a winner? Should we escalate it to support? Probably. I don't know. That's what the comments are for. Also, we are getting dangerously close to 5,000 subs. So if you made it all the way to the end of this video, help me out. Let's try to get 5,000 subs. That's the goal. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon if you want to see new videos as they come out. And share this channel with your guildmates. If you have 70 guildmates, send out a guild mail all. Check out Melt on YouTube.com. Maybe you'll like some of the videos. We've got over 300 Arc of War videos. I'm sure there's something they could use or learn from. And yeah, I shouldn't have to pitch the channel. We teach people how to play the game better. You want to have better guildmates. Easy sell. All right. Let me know in the comments. Did I miss it? Did I hit it? Where do we go from here? Do we just send it right to support? I don't know. But does Rogers need a nerf or what? All right, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.